Good morning and thank you very much for joining us. I am Yori Folarin. Let's look at the fuel price hike. The fuel price increase, it hit us very, very recently. I don't know that we were expecting it or not, and we'll look at, I have a couple of experts on this subject, and we'll look into it. First of all, let me introduce Mr. Bala Zakar, Public Affairs Analyst. Thank you very much for coming along.
Thank you.
I just called you Public Affairs Analyst because that is indeed what you are, but he's
Correct.
also an engineer, and he's a geological engineer for that matter. But all of that, we're putting that to one side this morning. With all of that knowledge, we try to find out how we can relate with this. And I'm also happy to have Comrade Emmanuel Idogen, who is Vice Chair, TUC, Lagos State Council. Yes. I'm just going to take a guess and say TUC doesn't like the fuel price increase. No. I'm just guessing.
We don't like it. We don't like it.
Okay, we'll come to that. Let's start off. If I could start off with you, Bala. As I was saying, half jokingly, not very many people are impressed with this fuel price increase, but it probably could be in place for a number of reasons. So what is your, being an informed commentator on this matter,
yes,
what is your read of the hike this time? This is not what Nigerians were expecting.
I was highly disappointed, but I was not surprised. I was not surprised because I felt the trajectory we are on at the moment is the wrong trajectory. The economic restructuring mechanism we decided to deploy to the downstream sector of the Nigerian oil and gas industry is the wrong economic restructuring mechanism based on peculiarities. Mm-hmm. In other words, the same restructuring mechanism of deregulation will have been functional and effective. But before you deploy mechanisms, generally when you talk about an economic sector, especially national sectors of an economy, a sector can be deregulated and you get the best out of it. A sector can be liberalized and you get the best out of it. A sector can even be privatized or commercialized. So all these four restructuring mechanisms work. But before you deploy any mechanism, you have to look at what we call indices or variables.
First of all, thank you very much for pointing out those shades of differences. So which one are we in exactly?
What we are in is, I can best describe as pseudo-deregulation, not even complete deregulation.
What's the pseudo part? Because pseudo-deregulation, is like a fake deregulation.
No, not necessarily. Incomplete.
Oh, okay.
Incomplete.
Oh, okay.
So it's called pseudo-deregulation in the sense that, from the context, from the technical definition of deregulation, what you mean is there will be no control of certain things like price. Mm-hmm. You will not determine where somebody is going to go and probably get the refined product, in this case technically called distillates. Mm-hmm. But most of the time what concerns the ordinary masses of this country probably are petrol and diesel. You will not control how the person, we are an importing nation, you will not control how the person gets his foreign currency to go and import. You will not control where he brings it from. And by the time he gets in country, you will not decide the amount at which he is going to sell it. Because an average businessman is into the business of cost minimization and price or profit maximization. But when you see an agency of government also coming in to say, the amount must not exceed Y, or Z dollars, Z naira per liter, that means it is not a complete deregulation. Government still has some control. So the best you can technically describe it is to say it is pseudo. But for me, generally, whether it's pseudo or full deregulation, it is the wrong structuring mechanism you need to deploy to the downstream sector. I will prefer, if I have my way, that we deploy the mechanism of liberalization. If we can deploy liberalization, let us deploy the mechanism of commercialization. Definitely, I'm not for privatization, and I have my reasons. But let me concentrate on the ones I am suggesting or recommending. Liberalization simply means you will allow many players to come in. Then if you have a government arm of that kind of industry or sector, let the government arm die naturally to the glare of everybody. A practical example is Nitel. What happened in the case of Nitel was not privatization. It was liberalization. Other telecoms companies come in. And apart from that, again, technology was coming in. So even if we had open it or not, by today, looking at Nigeria today, we will have been forced to open our arms. But in that case, you allow other telecoms company to come in, and then Nitel died a natural death. And that was why you don't see anybody protesting in Nitel, blah, blah, blah. But in the case of the downstream sector, especially the refineries, all we are saying, liberalize it. If you liberalize it, let other players come in. If the Nigerian refineries or the Nigerian-owned refineries cannot compete, let them die naturally. And if they die naturally, somebody like me will not be bothering myself about why do you want to privatize? Why do you want to sell it to nepotic relations and things like that?
Thank you very much indeed, for that overview. And we're going to come back, but I need to hear from the comrade as well. Yeah. So, Comrade Emmanuel, you were saying, in the very shortest way that possible, that this is something that we don't like. What is the situation in relation to are you trying to negotiate with government, or is it a protest that you are letting government understand this is where we are at? I know you're speaking for TUC in Lagos State. Yes. Let me hear it, please.
Okay. Good morning, Nigerians. The problem we are in today is as a result of leadership poverty. Leadership poverty in the sense that you discover that we have three arms of government: the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. But all these arms of government, we now increase the fourth arm of government. Because if you look at the executive, it's a microcosm of corruption. If you look at the legislators are a microcosm of corruption. And the judiciary now is not the one inheriting corruption. Because the executive and the legislature, you pass it to the judiciary to play the game for them. Look at the time we're negotiating. We're on the table negotiating. They went to a court to go and take an injunction against the labor, which is not done anywhere. And the fact remains that we are still negotiating. People said labor compromise during the call-ups protests we wanted to go into, but no, because we're looking at living a coronavirus period. The country is barely struggling to meet up all the demand salary payments for the rest. So these are the labor leaders look at.
Okay, when you say you're blaming it you're blaming our situation here, and the situation, to be specific, is fuel shooting to 117 naira. Now you say if you look close enough, you find that corruption is at the bottom of all of this. How?
Because I was listening to the Minister of State of Petroleum yesterday on channels. He is saying that this is not food regulation. If they are doing food regulation, that the price would be more higher than this, which means it is the NNPC, the sole importer of fuel in this country to speak, because the government of Nigeria is not telling us the truth. And they said the independent marketers can bring in fuel. It's not true. The independents are buying from NNPC. That's why you discover that corruption is the major thing.
Okay, I get your meaning now. And we'll also go into it a bit as to, things like Niger, for instance. Not all Nigerians understand exactly what is going on between us and Niger. In fact, there are all sorts of things flying over social media about building roads to Niger, building rail tracks to Niger. Now, Nigeria actually is working towards, dare I say it, importing fuel from Niger. And there are all sorts of questions as to who exactly owns the refinery in Niger. What is the state of our own refinery? You know, before we continue, gentlemen, we have a report that, you know, we put together in our newsroom. Let's take that and then continue with this conversation.
A nationwide industrial action by the NLC and TUC was fixed for September the 28th to protest the twin increases in prices of fuel and electricity tariff. But the government reached out to organized labor to sheath its sword and engage in dialogue. In the end, a memorandum of understanding was signed, and details included fixing existing refineries and entrusting them to efficient management, creating an enabling environment for new refineries, and achieving enhanced and sustainable local refining capacity. The MOU also contained a review of the increase in electricity tariff. But after subsequent meetings, Labour says it has lost confidence in the government's willingness to abide by the conditions set out. At a news conference to set the records straight the day after, the NLC and the TUC believe the recent fuel price hike constitutes a breach of the dialogue process.
While the committee was still working, the government had not taken any step to revitalize the local refineries and has flagrantly refused to discuss with the unions in the oil sector and gas sector as agreed.
If we say that we can't accept the regulation that is import-driven, and that the refineries must what before you think of it, and then you go into price fixing. Price fixing is not the same thing as deregulating.
After Sunday's failed meeting, the government has reached out to Labour to return to the discussion table, but these Labour leaders say that will be determined by the government's response to prioritizing the functioning of local refineries.
It is clear that government is not prepared for a sincere and honest dialogue on finding a lasting solution to the twin issues of petroleum price increase and electricity tariff.
The NLC and the TUC are reaching out to their organs for the next step.